The spaceport was alive with noise and movement, voices echoing across the metal halls, ships docking and departing in endless rhythm. The alien girl walked quietly among the travelers, her head lowered as if she were just another passerby, but her ears caught every sound. Her people had taught her to stay silent, to never listen too closely to outsiders, but curiosity pulled at her like a chain. Humans had arrived that day, loud and confident, speaking in ways that made the others stare. They laughed too much, they spoke too freely, and yet every word seemed heavy with something she had never known: openness. She found herself drifting closer to them, her steps slower, her heart quickening as she pretended to examine the walls but kept her ears sharp. The group of humans sat together, sharing food and stories, their voices rising above the background hum. She could not understand everything. They used phrases unfamiliar to her, but some words slipped through clearly enough. They spoke of families, of children, of how their people grew in number. Then, one of them laughed, saying in a half-joking tone how strange it must seem to others the way humans reproduced. The others laughed too, shaking their heads, adding details in a way that made no sense to her. Their words tangled in her mind, forming a picture so different, so impossible, that she froze where she stood. Her people had rules, and one of the oldest was silence about reproduction. It was never spoken of, not even between family members, not even between lovers. Children were raised to believe it was a sacred mystery, hidden until one was older, and even then the knowledge came in whispers, shrouded with shame. To ask openly was to bring punishment, to invite exile. Yet here the humans spoke as if it were nothing, a simple subject, even a joke to laugh at. She pressed herself against the wall, her breath shallow, listening harder though fear told her to walk away. The humans continued their talk, describing acts she had never imagined. Her face grew warm, her hands clenched against her sides as her thoughts raced. Could it be true? Do they really do that? Is that how their children are born? Her heart pounded with disbelief. Her kind had always seen humans as reckless, unpredictable. But this was beyond anything she had been told. She tried to shake the thoughts from her head, but they clung to her mind like fire. She glanced at her people who passed by, careful not to let her expression show. If anyone guessed what she had heard, she would be in danger. The council had punished others before, even banished those who dared to ask questions about such matters. To them, silence was safety, and curiosity was a disease. But inside her, curiosity had already taken root, deep and strong. She could not tear it out now. She shifted her weight, pretending to study the arrivals board, but her eyes slid back to the humans. Their faces were so open, their voices so free, as if they carried no shame in what they said. One leaned back, grinning as he told the others a story about how his parents had explained things to him when he was young. The alien girl's breath caught. Among her people, no parent would ever dare. No one would speak so plainly. Yet here, humans treated knowledge not as forbidden but as natural. Her mind spun with questions. Was this why humans were so bold, so unafraid of the galaxy? Did their openness make them stronger, while her people hid behind silence? She thought of the children in her colony, growing up with confusion, told only to obey and never to ask. Humans were different. Their children grew up knowing truths her people dared not whisper. Maybe that was why they laughed so easily, even in places filled with strangers. She pressed her hands together tightly, trying to steady herself. She knew she should leave, walk away before the thoughts consumed her. But her feet would not move. She needed to know more, needed to hear every word, even if it broke every rule. When the humans laughed again, she flinched as if their voices struck her heart. Every detail they spoke left her more shocked, more fascinated, more afraid. When the humans finally rose to leave, her chest ached with a strange emptiness. She wanted to follow, to ask them directly, but fear locked her in place. Her people watched humans with suspicion, and if anyone saw her lingering near them, questions would be asked. Still, as the humans walked away, their voices fading into the crowd, she whispered to herself, could it be true? Do humans really do that to reproduce? The words felt dangerous in her mouth, like fire she could not spit out. She looked around quickly, terrified someone had heard her, but the crowd moved on, unaware. Her heart thundered in her chest as she leaned back against the cold wall, her knees weak. She had heard something forbidden, something she could never hear, and now it lived inside her like a secret flame. That night, long after the noise of the spaceport quieted, she lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling. The images her mind had formed from the humans' laughter refused to leave. She thought of her people's silence, of the punishment waiting for anyone who asked too much. And she thought of the humans, fearless and open, speaking as though the galaxy itself were not watching. Her breath trembled, her eyes wide in the dark. She knew her curiosity had already crossed a line. She had tasted forbidden knowledge, and once curiosity began, it could never be undone. The spaceport always felt crowded, ships coming and going, voices from 100 worlds mixing into one endless hum. The alien girl walked among them quietly, her steps careful, her eyes fixed on the floor so no one would see how restless she truly was. She had not slept much since overhearing the humans' strange conversation. Their words had taken root inside her mind, growing into questions she could not shake. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard their laughter again, saw their easy smiles, and remembered the way they spoke of reproduction without fear or shame. Her people would never dare. Yet the humans had done it as if it were nothing. The thought burned inside her, and no matter how hard she tried, she could not let it go. She told herself she would avoid them, that it was safer to keep her distance. But curiosity was stronger than fear. When she entered the docking bay that day, her eyes searched for them almost against her will. Most of the group she had seen earlier was gone, scattered across the station. But one human remained. A young cadet, dressed in a simple uniform, stood near a cargo crate, scanning something on his wrist device. His posture was relaxed, his face uncovered, his features sharp but strangely open. He looked nothing like the frightening image her people had painted of humans. He looked ordinary. And yet, to her, he was the most dangerous person in the room, because he carried the answers she longed to know. She froze, torn between leaving before he noticed or stepping closer. Her heart raced as she watched him tilt his head, eyes flicking across the crowd as though he felt someone watching. For a moment, his gaze passed over her, and she looked away quickly, pretending to study the wall. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She had been careful not to speak of what she had overheard, but even standing near him felt like breaking the rules. Still, her feet betrayed her. Before she realized it, she had drifted a little closer, her body pulled by curiosity stronger than her will. The human looked up again, this time catching her in his gaze. His eyes lingered, curious but not hostile. She felt her breath catch as he raised a brow, then gave a faint smile, small but enough to make her chest tighten. No one in her world would smile so casually at a stranger. Yet here was a human, showing no fear, no shame, only quiet friendliness. She looked away quickly, her face warming, but it was too late. He had noticed her. He stepped forward, closing the distance with easy confidence. She felt panic rise in her chest, but her body would not move. When he stopped in front of her, she dared to glance up. His expression was calm, his voice steady as he spoke. She could not understand every word, but the tone was clear. He was asking if she was all right, if she was lost perhaps. She nodded quickly, her throat too tight to speak, her eyes darting away. The human tilted his head, studying her for a moment, then chuckled softly, the sound warm and disarming. He said something else, his words flowing too quickly for her to catch, but she understood the gesture he made as he pointed to the ships, then to himself. He was explaining that he worked there, that he was part of the patrol. His voice carried no arrogance, no sharpness, only calm certainty. She found herself staring at him again, her mind torn in two directions. One part screamed at her to leave, to walk away before she betrayed herself. The other begged her to ask, to seize the chance while she had it. The question burned on her tongue, but fear chained her lips shut. What if he laughed? What if he told others? What if her people found out? Instead, she asked something simple, something safe. Her voice shook as she gestured weakly to his uniform and said in broken words, "You, soldier." He nodded with a faint smile, clearly pleased she had spoken. "Cadet," he replied, pointing to himself. She repeated the word softly, rolling it on her tongue. His smile widened, and he said it again, slower this time, as if teaching her. Something about the way he spoke made her heart stir. He was not mocking her. He was patient. They stood in silence for a moment, the noise of the spaceport swirling around them. She wanted to say more, wanted to ask the question that haunted her, but the weight of her people's rules crushed her voice. Instead, she muttered a polite farewell in her language and stepped back. But the human did not let her retreat so easily. He tilted his head again, giving her that same disarming smile, and said a short phrase she did not understand. Then he lifted his hand in a gesture she had seen humans use before. A wave. She hesitated, then raised her own hand awkwardly in return. The small exchange made her chest feel strangely light, as though she had done something reckless but freeing. As she walked away, her heart pounded with thoughts she could not silence. The question had burned inside her all along, but now it grew even stronger. She had seen the humans laugh about it, and now she had stood face to face with one, close enough to ask. But she had not. She had let fear hold her back. In her quarters that night, she sat curled against the wall, staring at her hands. She replayed the meeting over and over, remembering the cadet's smile, the calm tone of his voice, the ease with which he had stood in front of her. She had expected danger, arrogance, perhaps cruelty. Instead, she found patience, warmth, and something she could not explain. Her heart whispered the truth she tried to deny. She would see him again. She would speak to him again. And next time, she might not be able to hold the question back. The spaceport carried its usual rhythm. Ships docking and leaving, merchants shouting their prices, travelers moving in endless waves. But for the alien girl, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Ever since she had spoken to the human cadet, her mind refused to rest. She replayed every moment in her head. His calm eyes, the small smile, the way he had spoken without fear or shame. She had expected a monster, someone cold and dangerous, but instead she had seen patience and warmth. That brief meeting had planted something inside her, a restless hunger that only grew stronger with each passing hour. She had promised herself she would not return to the docking bay, yet her steps betrayed her. Again and again, she found excuses to pass near where the human cadet worked. Sometimes he noticed her, sometimes he didn't, but each glance, each shared nod, fed her curiosity. She wanted to ask him the forbidden question, the one that burned her every waking thought. She wanted to know if the stories she had overheard were true, if humans truly reproduced in such a shocking, unbelievable way. The thought of saying it aloud made her throat tighten. Her people had raised her to believe such questions were poison. To even hint at them was to risk exile, maybe worse. Yet the more she tried to suppress it, the stronger it became. She whispered the words to herself in the dark, trembling at the danger even as her lips shaped the sounds. One day, she lingered too long near a market stall, watching him from a distance. He was speaking to another human, laughing quietly, his voice carrying over the crowd. The sound made her chest tighten with something she didn't understand. When the other human left, she felt the pull again, stronger than before. Her feet moved without her permission, and soon she was standing near him. The cadet noticed her immediately, his brow lifting with faint surprise before his lips curved into a small, easy smile. He said something in his language, gentle and questioning. She nodded quickly, her voice failing her, and he seemed to understand her nervousness. He leaned casually against a crate, lowering his tone as if to make it easier for her to approach. Her heart pounded. This was her chance. The question sat on her tongue, hot and heavy. She opened her mouth, trying to form the words, but they twisted in her throat. Instead, what escaped was clumsy and half-formed. Humans, how species continue. The moment the words left her lips, her blood turned cold. The cadet froze, his smile fading into shock. His eyes widened as he stared at her, trying to make sure he had understood. Heat rushed to her face, and she wished she could swallow the words back, bury them before they reached his ears. But it was too late. He glanced around quickly, scanning the crowd as if checking who had heard. She followed his gaze and her stomach sank. A pair of her own people stood nearby, their expressions sharp, their eyes narrowing at her slip. They whispered to each other, their faces twisted in disapproval. She knew what they were thinking, what they would report. The cadet looked back at her, his brows knitting together. His voice was low, serious now, no longer casual. He spoke quickly, his words urgent, though she could only catch fragments. Still, the meaning was clear. He was warning her. She had said something dangerous. Her chest tightened as panic rose. Her people would not forgive this. To them, curiosity was corruption. They would drag her before the council, accuse her of being tainted by human influence. She shook her head, whispering, "No, no, I did not mean." But her voice was thin, powerless against the truth of what she had spoken. The cadet stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. He seemed torn, as if unsure whether to comfort her or distance himself to protect her. Finally, he lifted a hand, gesturing toward the far corridors where the crowd was thinner. She understood. He wanted her to move, to escape the eyes watching her. Her legs felt heavy, but she forced herself to follow, her heart pounding with fear. When they reached the quieter passage, she leaned against the wall, clutching her chest. The cadet stood a step away, watching her with concern. His eyes searched her face, as if he wanted to ask why she had spoken such words, why she would risk so much. But he did not press. He only waited, patient and silent, giving her space to breathe. Her voice shook when she finally spoke. "I should not have asked." Forbidden. The word felt sharp, dangerous, but it was the only one she could find. She expected him to laugh, to mock her, but he did not. Instead, he nodded slowly, his expression serious, his tone calm when he finally replied. Though she could not understand every word, the meaning was clear. He was telling her he would not repeat what she had said. He would keep her secret. Relief flooded her chest, but it was tangled with something else, shame. She had slipped, exposed her forbidden curiosity, and now her people would whisper of her corruption. Yet, standing there with him, she felt something strange too. For the first time, someone had not punished her for asking, had not silenced her with fear. He had only looked at her with concern, as if her question had not made her weak but human. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. She stiffened as two of her people walked past, their eyes narrowing suspiciously at the sight of her with him. She lowered her head, pretending not to notice, but their disapproval burned against her skin. The cadet shifted subtly, stepping closer, his presence a silent shield between her and their gaze. Her heart fluttered at the gesture, even as dread grew inside her. The council would hear of this. Rumors would spread. When the corridor was quiet again, she whispered, almost to herself, "They will not forgive." Her voice cracked, but when she looked up at him, his expression was steady, unshaken. For a moment, she thought she saw something in his eyes. A promise, faint but real. A promise that he would not abandon her, even if her own people did. As she walked away that day, her thoughts were a storm. Fear gnawed at her, but beneath it, curiosity burned brighter than ever. She had spoken the forbidden question, and though it nearly destroyed her, she could no longer turn back. The human had not mocked her, had not betrayed her. Instead, he had given her something she had never expected. A reason to ask again. The council chamber was cold, built of dark stone and polished steel, its tall walls etched with symbols of tradition that pressed down like a weight. The alien girl stood at the center of the circular floor, her body trembling though she tried to keep her head raised. Around her, the elders sat in their high seats, their faces sharp with disappointment and suspicion. The chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the lights, but she could feel their anger like heat on her skin. She had been summoned after whispers spread through the spaceport. Whispers that she had spoken forbidden words, words no one in their society was allowed to utter. Her chest felt tight as she tried to breathe, her heart pounding in her ears. She remembered the two witnesses who had overheard her slip near the human cadet. They had not confronted her, but their eyes had burned with judgment, and she had known instantly what they would do. She had hoped, foolishly, that maybe the rumors would fade, but her people did not ignore such things. Curiosity about reproduction was treated as sickness, as corruption. And now, she was being judged for it. An elder leaned forward, his voice deep and hard. You were heard speaking of matters that are forbidden. Matters that no one of our kind is allowed to question. Do you deny it? Her lips parted, but no sound came. She thought of lying, thought of shaking her head and pretending the words had never escaped her mouth. But the memory of the human's gaze, steady and patient, filled her mind. He had not shamed her. He had not silenced her. For the first time, she had spoken freely, even if only for a moment. To deny it now felt like burying that spark of freedom. Her voice shook as she whispered, I did ask. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The elders' expressions hardened, their eyes narrowing with disgust. Another elder hissed, Do you understand what you have done? These words taint the ears of those who hear them. They poison the mind. Our people keep such knowledge hidden to protect us, to keep our society strong. And yet you let the influence of humans twist you into breaking our most sacred law. At the mention of humans, her head lifted slightly. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to say that it had not been humans who corrupted her but her own hunger to understand. But before she could, a different elder leaned forward, her voice sharp as a blade. This is the danger we have always spoken of. Humans carry corruption with them. They are reckless, shameless creatures, and now we see what happens when one of our own listens too closely. Already, she has been seen in their company. Already, she speaks their poison aloud. The girl's stomach twisted, fear and anger clashing inside her. Yes, she had been near a human. Yes, she had asked the question. But was it corruption to want to know? Was it weakness to admit curiosity? Her fists clenched at her sides, her voice trembling as she finally spoke. I only wanted to understand. They spoke of it as if it were natural, as if it were nothing to hide. Why should we fear knowledge that others treat as life? The words echoed across the chamber, bold and dangerous. The elders stiffened, their faces twisting in outrage. One struck the arm of his chair with his hand. Silence. You dare question the wisdom of generations? Our strength comes from discipline, from silence, from turning away from dangerous curiosities. The humans laugh because they are reckless. That recklessness will be their doom. But we, his voice lowered, heavy with finality, we will not fall with them. The girl's breath shook, her heart aching. She wanted to scream that they were wrong, that maybe it was their silence that weakened them, that maybe humans thrived because they were unafraid of knowledge. But she bit the words back. To speak them aloud would only seal her fate. She lowered her gaze, the fire in her chest warring with the fear pressing down on her. Another elder leaned closer, her voice quieter but no less dangerous. You are young, and perhaps you can still be corrected. But if you continue on this path, if you let their influence grow in you, there will be no place for you among us. You will be cast out. Do you understand? The girl nodded slowly, though her heart rebelled. She heard the sentence clearly. This was her warning. One more slip, one more step toward the humans, and she would be exiled, left to survive alone in a galaxy that had no mercy. She whispered, I understand. The elders leaned back, satisfied with her submission. The leader struck the floor with his staff, the sound echoing through the chamber. Then hear our command. You will not speak with humans again. You will not linger near them. You will not let their words take root in your mind. You will return to your duties, and you will be silent. If we hear otherwise, you will no longer belong to us. The chamber doors opened, and guards stepped forward, motioning for her to leave. She walked slowly, her legs heavy, her chest tight with despair. The doors closed behind her with a heavy thud, sealing her fate. She was free, for now, but one wrong step would end everything she had known. As she walked through the empty corridors, her mind spun. She should have felt relieved that they had not exiled her already. Instead, she felt a deeper ache. They had ordered her silence, demanded she bury her questions, but the spark inside her only burned hotter. The human cadet's face flashed in her mind, his calm eyes, his patient smile. He had not shamed her for asking. He had not silenced her. For the first time in her life, she had spoken freely, and she could not return to being silent again. By the time she reached her quarters, her decision was already forming. The council's warning had not ended her curiosity. It had only made it stronger. She sat alone in the dim light, whispering to herself the question that refused to die. Humans, do they really do that to reproduce? Her voice shook, her eyes burning with tears, but her lips curved into a faint, defiant smile. If her people would not give her answers, then she knew where she would find them. The corridors of the station felt colder than usual, every shadow carrying the weight of danger. The alien girl walked quickly, her cloak pulled tight around her body, her head lowered so none of her people would notice her. Ever since the council had dragged her before them and issued their warning, her life had become a prison of silence. Every glance from her own kind felt heavy with suspicion, every whisper behind her back a reminder that they were waiting for her to slip again. She tried to act normal, to bury her curiosity as they demanded, but the spark inside her refused to die. At night, she replayed the moment she had dared to ask the human cadet her half-formed question. His shock, his concern, his silent promise not to betray her, it all haunted her. Even as fear gnawed at her, she found herself drawn back to him, the one person who had not silenced her. And so, despite the risk, she returned to the docking bay. The human cadet was there, as if fate itself had placed him in her path. He leaned against a cargo crate, adjusting the straps on his pack, his rifle slung casually over his back. He looked tired, his uniform rumpled from long hours of duty, but his eyes were sharp as ever, scanning the crowds. When he saw her, surprise flickered across his face, then softened into recognition. A faint smile tugged at his lips, though it faded quickly as he noticed her nervousness. She froze a few steps away, her heart pounding. Fear screamed at her to turn back, to run before someone saw them together. But curiosity burned stronger than fear. Slowly, she stepped closer. The cadet tilted his head, saying something in his language, his tone questioning but gentle. She did not understand the words, but she understood the intent. He was asking if she was all right. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she could not answer. Then, with trembling lips, she whispered, "I must ask." His brow furrowed, his smile fading into something serious. He gestured for her to follow him, leading her to a quieter corner of the bay where shadows concealed them from wandering eyes. She followed, her steps unsteady, her mind racing with both dread and anticipation. When they were alone, he turned to face her, his stance protective, his voice low as he asked again what troubled her. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, her voice breaking. "Is it true? Do humans really do that to reproduce?" The silence that followed was heavy, stretching like a blade across her chest. The cadet stiffened, his eyes widening in shock. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, as though he wasn't sure whether to laugh, scold, or answer. His cheeks reddened faintly, and for a long moment he just stared at her, clearly struggling to find words. Her own face burned with shame. She wanted to run, to bury herself in the dark and never return, but her feet stayed rooted. Her people had warned her this curiosity would destroy her, but she could not let it go. She had risked everything for this moment, and she would not take the words back. Finally, the cadet exhaled, his hand rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. He spoke slowly, carefully, choosing words that she could understand. His voice was low, embarrassed, but honest. He explained, haltingly, the truth of human reproduction, confirming what she had overheard. The more he spoke, the wider her eyes grew. She listened in stunned silence, her hands trembling, her breath quickening. Each detail seemed stranger, more impossible, yet his steady tone left no room for doubt. When he finished, she shook her head, whispering, "No, it cannot be. It is too strange, too reckless." Yet even as she denied it, she knew he was telling the truth. She had seen the casual way the other humans spoke of it. Now she heard it confirmed directly, and the knowledge shook her to her core. Her lips parted, and a nervous laugh escaped, soft and shaky. "You're kind. You speak of it as nothing. My people, they would exile me for saying the word. How do you live so free with this?" The cadet watched her carefully, his eyes serious now. He seemed to think for a moment, then placed a hand against his chest. He spoke a few simple words, his tone firm but not unkind. She could not understand them all, but the meaning reached her. For humans, this was life. It was natural, not forbidden. They did not live in fear of it. Her throat tightened as she lowered her gaze. The gulf between her people and his had never felt wider. Yet in that distance, she also saw why humans were different. They carried knowledge her people called shame, and instead of crumbling under it, they thrived. Perhaps that was why they laughed so freely, why they carried strength wherever they walked. She raised her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze. "If my people knew I asked you this, they would cast me out." Her voice cracked, but there was defiance beneath it. "But I cannot ask it. I cannot know it now." The cadet's face softened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. His hand brushed lightly against her arm, not as a command, not as a claim, but as reassurance. His touch was steady, calm, telling her without words that she was not alone in this. For the first time in her life, she felt both terrified and free. Terrified of what her people would do if they discovered the truth, but free because, for once, she had dared to ask and been answered. A sound from the far side of the bay broke the moment. Footsteps, voices, the unmistakable presence of her people approaching. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. If they saw her with him again, there would be no escape from punishment. The cadet's eyes hardened as he stepped back into the shadows, gesturing for her to leave quickly. Her chest ached as she turned to go, her legs heavy, her mind swirling with fear and wonder. She knew the risk had grown even greater now. But as she slipped back into the crowded halls, her lips whispered the truth that would not die: "It is real. Humans truly do that to reproduce." And the knowledge, forbidden though it was, filled her not only with fear, but with a strange and dangerous excitement. The corridors of the station stretched endlessly, but to the alien girl they felt narrower with every step. Her heart pounded against her chest as she moved quickly, slipping through the crowd, hoping her people hadn't seen her speaking to the human again. The voices she heard behind her earlier had faded, yet the echo of them lingered in her mind like a warning. She had risked everything by asking her forbidden question, and now the truth lived inside her. Humans truly did that to reproduce. The thought alone made her head spin, her body warm with disbelief and unease. Back in her quarters, she sat curled against the wall, hugging her knees tightly to her chest. She replayed every word the cadet had said, every careful explanation, every awkward pause when he searched for simple words she could understand. He had not mocked her, had not pushed her away. He had given her the truth, though it embarrassed him, though it had shocked her. She whispered into the silence, her voice trembling. "It is real. It is not a story, not a lie." The sound of her own words made her flinch, as if someone might hear through the walls, but she could not stop repeating them. The knowledge was dangerous, forbidden, yet it had taken root inside her like fire. Days passed, and she tried to go about her duties, tried to act as if nothing had changed. But it was impossible. Every time she saw humans in the spaceport, her eyes lingered too long, her mind burning with questions. She compared them to her own people, how they laughed freely, how they spoke without fear. She began to wonder if that openness was their strength, if that was why they thrived where so many others struggled. Her people lived in silence, bound by rules that crushed curiosity, but humans embraced it, even when the subject was reproduction. One evening, as she walked through the central market, she felt eyes on her. She glanced to the side and saw two of her people watching from the corner, whispering behind their hands. Her chest tightened. She lowered her head, moving quickly through the stalls, but the weight of their stares followed her. Rumors had already begun to spread. She could feel them, heavy and poisonous, curling through the whispers of her people. By the next morning, the tension grew sharper. As she entered the mess hall, conversations quieted. Eyes slid toward her, filled with suspicion. A friend she had known since childhood avoided her gaze, turning away as though even being seen near her was dangerous. Her stomach twisted with shame and anger. They didn't know the truth, not fully, yet they judged her as if she were already corrupted. Later that day, she found herself wandering again, drawn back toward the docking bay. She told herself it was foolish, that she should stay far from the human cadet. But her feet carried her anyway. When she saw him, standing alone near his ship, her heart leapt and her fear melted into something else. He noticed her immediately, his brows lifting in faint surprise before softening into that patient look she had come to expect from him. She approached slowly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. When she stopped before him, her voice shook as she whispered, "They suspect me." He frowned, tilting his head, clearly not understanding all of her words, but he caught enough. His expression darkened, concern flashing in his eyes. He said something quietly, gesturing for her to stay calm, his voice carrying steady reassurance. Her throat tightened. She wanted to ask him so many things: how he could live so openly, how humans could treat something forbidden as if it were ordinary. The question burst from her before she could stop it. "Do you not fear? You're kind, you laugh, you speak, you do not hide. Why?" The cadet looked at her for a long moment, then placed his hand against his chest. He spoke slowly, carefully, his words simple but heavy with meaning. She could not catch everything, but she understood enough. To humans, reproduction was not shame, it was life. To them, it was natural, nothing to bury in silence. Her eyes burned as tears threatened to fall. She whispered, "We are taught to fear it. To fear even the thought. They call it poison. But you live." Her voice cracked, and she lowered her gaze, ashamed of her trembling. The cadet hesitated, then reached out carefully, his fingers brushing her arm in a gesture of reassurance. His touch was warm, steady, grounding her in a way she had never known. For a moment, she let herself breathe, let herself believe that she was not wrong for wanting to know. But the moment shattered with the sound of footsteps. Harsh, heavy, unmistakable. She spun, her heart leaping into her throat. A pair of guards from her people stood at the edge of the bay, their eyes locked on her, their expressions hard. They had seen her standing too close to a human, seen her speaking to him in secret. Fear crashed over her like a wave. The cadet stiffened, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon at his side, but she shook her head quickly, her eyes wide. Fighting them now would destroy everything. The guards whispered into their comms, their gazes never leaving her. She whispered urgently to the human, her voice breaking, "Go. Please, go. If they see you with me again, they will." Her words trailed off, but he understood. His eyes burned with reluctance, but he gave a short nod, stepping back into the shadows of the ship. The guards approached her, their voices cold. "You were warned. You continue to dishonor our laws." One seized her arm, gripping it tightly. She winced but did not resist. Her heart pounded as they dragged her away, her mind screaming. She had wanted answers, and she had found them, but the cost was growing heavier by the day. As they pulled her through the corridor, she glanced back one last time. The cadet stood half hidden in the shadows, his eyes locked on hers. His expression was unreadable, but his stance carried a promise. He would not abandon her. Not yet. Her chest tightened with fear and hope tangled together. She did not know what awaited her now, but one thing was certain. The truth she had learned could not be buried, and the bond she had forged with the human could not be undone. The council chamber loomed over her once more, its towering walls and carved symbols meant to remind all who entered of tradition and obedience. The alien girl stood at the center of the cold floor, her wrists aching where the guards had gripped her. Every seat around her was filled with elders, their robes dark and severe, their faces carved into masks of anger and disappointment. The silence pressed down heavier than the stone above her, broken only when the eldest among them leaned forward, his voice sharp as steel. "You were warned," he said, each word echoing through the chamber. "You were told not to approach humans again. And yet, you disobey. You were seen consorting with one in secret. Do you deny it? Her heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. She could have lied, could have begged, could have denied everything. But the memory of the human cadet's patient eyes, his steady touch, his quiet promise not to abandon her burned inside her. She whispered, her voice trembling but clear, "I do not deny it." A murmur spread through the chamber, harsh and bitter. One elder slammed a hand against the arm of his chair. "Corrupted," he spat. "The human poison spreads through her. She is no longer one of us. She is tainted." Another leaned forward, her eyes cold. "She is a danger to the young, to our way of life. Curiosity is a disease, and she carries it openly. If we let her remain, her questions will spread like fire." The eldest raised a hand, silencing them. His gaze pierced through her, heavy and unyielding. "You stand at the edge of exile. One more step, and you will be cast out forever. But the council grants you this final chance. You will renounce what you have done. You will swear before us all that you will never again seek the company of humans, never again speak of their corruption. Swear, and you may remain." Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. She felt the weight of her people pressing down, the eyes of everyone she had ever known watching her, waiting for her to bow her head and accept silence. Safety lay in obedience. If she swore, she could stay, live quietly, bury her questions until her last breath. But her mind rebelled. She thought of the humans in the spaceport, laughing without fear. She thought of the cadet, steady even when she asked him the forbidden question. She thought of the truth she had learned, shocking and strange but undeniable. And she thought of her people, clinging to silence, crushing every spark of curiosity. Her fists clenched. The words of denial would not come. The eldest leaned closer. "Swear it. Swear, or you are nothing." Tears burned her eyes, but her voice rose, shaking yet defiant. "I will not swear." The chamber erupted in outrage. Elders shouted over one another, their voices filled with fury. "Exile," one cried. "Corruption cannot remain among us," another spat. Guards moved forward, their hands gripping their weapons. The eldest struck his staff against the floor, the sound cracking through the uproar. Silence fell again. His eyes bored into her as he spoke with finality. "So be it. You are no longer of us. From this day forward, you are cast out. You will leave these halls, and you will never return. You are alone." The words struck her like a blade. Her knees weakened, her throat tight, but she did not fall. She refused to give them the satisfaction. The guards stepped forward, seizing her arms, dragging her toward the great doors. The elders watched in silence, their judgment heavy and cold. As the doors slammed behind her, the sound echoed through her chest. She stumbled as the guards shoved her into the corridor, her heart pounding with grief and fear. She had lost everything, her people, her place, her safety. She was alone. But not completely. Her eyes lifted, and there in the shadows of the hall stood the human cadet. He must have followed when the guards dragged her inside, waiting, watching. His face was tense, his body ready, as if he had known what the council would decide. When their eyes met, his expression softened, and he stepped forward. For a moment, she could not breathe. Her people had abandoned her, stripped her of everything. But here was someone who did not turn away. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "They cast me out." He reached for her arm, steadying her as she swayed. His touch was firm, reassuring. He spoke in low tones she could not fully understand, but the meaning was clear. "You are not alone." Tears spilled down her cheeks, her body trembling. She had lost her people, her home, her identity. But in their place, she had found something else. Something terrifying and fragile, yet more powerful than anything she had known. She had found a choice. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Then I choose you." The human's eyes widened slightly, then softened with quiet understanding. He gave a small nod, his grip steady. The path ahead was dangerous, filled with uncertainty, but the choice had been made. She no longer belonged to her people. She belonged to her curiosity, to the truth she had sought, and to the bond she had forged with the human who had refused to silence her. And as he led her away from the council halls, into the unknown corridors of the station, her fear burned away just enough for a new fire to take its place. For the first time in her life, she felt free. The docking bay hummed with the sound of engines warming, the metallic scent of fuel sharp in the air. Lights flickered against the high ceiling, casting long shadows across the rows of ships. The alien girl stood at the edge of it all, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear, her mind still echoing with the words of the council. Exile. They had stripped her of everything. Her family, her place, her very name. To them, she no longer existed. She was a shadow cast out into the cold of the galaxy. And yet, she was not alone. The human cadet stood beside her, silent but steady, his presence as firm as the steel beneath their feet. He had said little since she whispered her choice, but he hadn't needed to. His hand on her arm, his unwavering gaze, told her more than words ever could. He would not walk away. Not now. Not after everything. They reached his ship, a vessel smaller than she expected, patched with scars of travel and battle, yet alive with quiet power. The ramp lowered with a hiss, and the cadet motioned for her to step inside. Her legs hesitated, her chest tightening. To step aboard was to leave everything she had ever known behind forever. Her people had already cast her out, but this was the moment she accepted it. She looked back one last time, her eyes sweeping the station that had been her home. The halls where she had grown up, the markets she had wandered, the chambers where she had been judged. It was all behind her now. She whispered under her breath, "I will not return." Then she stepped onto the ramp, the metal echoing beneath her feet, and crossed into the human's world. Inside, the ship was different from the clean halls of her people. It was practical, rough around the edges, built for survival rather than beauty. Lights hummed softly along the walls, panels blinking with coded signals she could not read. But there was warmth here too, a strange kind of life in the scars and dents. It was not perfect, but it was real. The cadet guided her to a seat, motioning gently for her to sit. She obeyed, her body sinking into the rough cushion, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. He moved to the controls, his fingers dancing across the panels with practiced ease. The ship rumbled, lifting from the floor, and she felt her heart leap into her throat. The bay doors opened above them, revealing the endless stars beyond. The sight made her chest ache with both wonder and fear. For the first time, she was leaving not as part of her people's fleet but as something else entirely. An exile, a fugitive, and yet also something freer. As the ship drifted into the dark void, silence filled the cabin. The cadet glanced back at her, his expression calm, though his eyes carried questions he did not ask. She met his gaze, her lips trembling, then whispered, "They called me corrupted. They said I was nothing. But I could not swear to silence." Her throat tightened as tears welled in her eyes. "I wanted to know. I needed to know. And now, I have lost everything." The human listened quietly, then stood and crossed the cabin to her side. He crouched in front of her, his eyes steady. He spoke slowly, carefully, his tone soft but firm. She did not understand every word, but she understood enough. He was telling her she had not lost everything. She still had choice. She still had herself. And she still had him. Her tears spilled freely as she pressed her hands to her face. His hand touched her arm gently, pulling her hands away just enough so their eyes met. She saw no judgment there, no anger, no disappointment. Only patience. Only respect. Her voice shook as she whispered, "I chose you. And I do not regret it." The cadet's lips curved faintly, not a wide smile, but something small and real. He nodded once, firmly, sealing the unspoken bond between them. Hours passed as the ship moved deeper into the star-strewn void. She sat in silence, watching the endless black broken by glittering lights, her mind racing with thoughts of the future. Fear lurked still, fear of pursuit, fear of the unknown. But for the first time in her life, hope burned brighter. She thought of the council's words, of the shame they tried to bind her with, and she shook her head softly. They had been wrong. Curiosity was not corruption. It was life. The cadet brought her food, strange rations packed in silver packets. She accepted them hesitantly, nibbling carefully, her lips curling into the faintest smile at the unfamiliar taste. He chuckled quietly at her expression, and for a moment the weight in her chest lifted. The silence between them grew easier, warmer. When the ship entered a quiet drift, he sat beside her, close but not too close, his body relaxed yet alert. For a long while, neither spoke. Then, her voice came softly, trembling but determined. When I said those words, it felt like breaking chains. My people feared humans because they could not imagine your way of life. But I could not return to silence after knowing. Her eyes lifted to his, wide and shining with tears. You changed everything. The cadet looked at her, his gaze steady. He reached out, his hand hovering before resting gently on hers. His touch was warm, grounding her in the storm of her emotions. No words were needed this time. The gesture itself was enough. She leaned back, closing her eyes, her breath shaky but calmer now. The galaxy outside was endless, uncertain, and dangerous. She had no people to return to, no home to call her own. But as she sat in the quiet hum of the ship, the human at her side, she felt something her people's silence had never given her. Freedom. The galaxy had cast her aside. Her own kind had abandoned her. But the human had refused to walk away, and she had chosen to walk with him. Together, they drifted into the stars, two exiles bound not by blood or law, but by the courage to ask, the courage to answer, and the bond that had grown between them in the shadows of forbidden truth. And for the first time in her life, she did not fear the unknown. She welcomed it.